Could I have your attention, please? We are continuing with the forum. Thank you for your attention. And I must say that it is a real pleasure. And I am very, very pleased that I received this part of the job in the Division of Labor, which we made beforehand when we put together the program. To introduce this wonderful panel, and for just a moment, I'm going to allow myself something which probably I shouldn't. I must say, to introduce this wonderful panel of my personal friends and the friends of this country, but also very, very important individuals in the history of this region, the region of Southeast Europe, Central Europe, and beyond. And I will start with Minister Schwarzenberg. We met a very long time ago, and it doesn't mean that we are not yet young, but it was a long time ago when Minister Schwarzenberg, under a different hat, led the first international human rights fact-finding mission to then Yugoslavia. And it was a wonderful event which definitely, as far as I know, traced and created a new path toward one of the most important challenges, but also achievements of our times. A different approach to individual human rights, a different understanding that without rule of law and respect for human and minority rights, there is no democracy, there is no development. So this is how I decided to introduce him today, not neglecting, of course, the role he's playing in under this other hat, as one of the leading politicians of the democratic transition and transformation of Czech Republic in the last more than 20 years. Stefano Sanino is a long-term friend and connoisseur of this country and the region. So when he became the Director General of DG Enlargement, I think it was a very smart move from the European Commission if they really want someone who is hardworking, who is all the time ready to do whatever it takes to add a new quality to the enlargement process, and thus, in my humble opinion, in fact help the European Union to be a better place. So thank you, Stefano, for being with us. Nikolai Mladenov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria, I also met a long time ago. Young, ambitious, smart, full of positive energy. That is how I recognized him when he was just 24. He is not too much older today. He managed to accomplish an incredible amount of things in these 14, 15 years. And I think Bulgaria was a very smart country when they decided that Niki is ready to be the minister and to do a very serious work, not only for Bulgaria, but this region and again beyond. Mr. Martonyi, Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary played such an important role again in those 20 and something years of transition and democratic transformation. And I must say I was very pleased every time I listened to his wise words. I was very pleased to be with him on some boards together, such as the board of the International Center for Democratic Transition. We missed him when he went to his new job, but we also understood that being the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary is something he has to take. So it was really an excellent news, and I must say he was of a great help to Serbia and the region during the Hungarian presidency, so I want to thank you for that. And last but not least, my dear friend Milan Ježovica, the State Secretary of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia. Milan is a person of incredible energy and even more understanding of all the complications, difficulties, but also achievements of this region and Serbia in particular. I remember our discussions a few years back when he was not in a state official position, how to move forward, what could be done to, in fact, find ourselves, I hope very firmly, on the path of European integration. And again, I'm not thinking only of Serbia, but the entire region of the Western Balkans. I hope that together they will give us the answers we are looking for when we think about the benefits of regional cooperation and of European perspective for this region. And now I must apologize on the name of the last member of this panel. You will not be surprised that he is flying instead of being with us. Minister Jeremic called me last night, something before midnight, to apologize to all of you in the first place, but he had to fly this morning at 5 o'clock to New York to the session of the UN Security Council. His message to the Belgrade Security Forum is very short. He is going there in search and hope for finding a peaceful solution for the crisis looming on the horizon. I think this is the role a Minister of Foreign Affairs has to do all the time. So I'm sure you will apologize and understand, and in the same time I wish that this meeting will be successful. I know this is the wish of every single of you today in this room. And now I would like to ask Minister Schwarzenberg the first question, and then I leave to my dear colleague and friend Maja Bobic from the Secretary General of the European Movement for Serbia to lead the rest of the panel. Kari, we were thinking to ask you the most complex question. Why not? Why is regional cooperation so important in today's global environment?
Well, I do think it is not as complex, but maybe as an introduction to the answer, I would like to say one thing. After listening to the President of the Serbian Republic, I thought only in those difficult days, God bless Serbia and the President to give him wisdom to lead Serbia through this really appearing events, and we all keep fingers crossed for you. I would like to stress that. But to answer you, exactly this, why is the regional cooperation necessary? Because, as you know, neither you nor me nor anybody on this present who is present probably has any prejudices or feeling being an enemy of somebody who lives in the highlands of Peru or somewhere in the jungle of southern Laos. But we all have relatives, we have all neighbors where we have difficulties, or even if we are honest to ourselves, we can't stand them. And that's of course in the policy the same. With the difficulties we have, as a rule, are with our neighbors. Once, because there's our old friend Marko here said, Czech Republic and Hungary have now the best relations in history because we aren't any neighbors anymore after 1,000 years being neighbors. So we, of course, in politics, it's necessary to overcome that. And on one side, being neighbors in the same region, as a rule, we understand much more the difficulties of each other. But admittedly, we as a rule share the same or mirror-like prejudices against others. And one lamentable experience in my now more than 70-year life is that we transmit very seldomly historical experience from one generation to the other, but as a rule, prejudices go from one generation to other nearly as it would be in the genes. And that's so difficult. So we have to work on it. And strangely enough, if we start seriously, not with big events, not with spectacular conferences or visits of heads of state, that's the decorum, but on real tough work on the ground, it works. Small examples of Europe. We all knew since the 50s that the Benelux countries work together, they still work together. As a rule, they share the same view in the European discussions, and they cooperated to the benefit of all these countries. So in the whole European history since World War II, the Benelux country, including the smallest Luxembourg, had an enormous influence in all European institutions. We know the very informal cooperation of Scandinavian states, and again it brings the same results. And in our region, we founded some more than 20 years ago a beautiful place in Hungary called Visegrad, a name of course we understand everybody, not speaking Hungarian, as that. And this cooperation, everybody thought it will die when we become members of the European Union. In the meantime, it's flourishing more than ever, after several times we were told that it is an idea of the past. We realized, especially within a big community like the European Union is, where there are big states, mighty powers, very different interests from Norwegian and from Sweden till, not Norwegia is not yet a member, but from Sweden till Sicily, that of course the countries who are in the same region, in 80% they have similar interests, as a rule very similar history, and the cooperation brings much more food. We do it in a very informal way, but I give you a small example. We fought valiantly together in Washington in the visa affair, and finally we succeeded with our Baltic friends, where again the Balts were, the three Baltic states were together. We are promoting common policy in the European Union because again we have an Eastern neighborship, on Caucasus problems, and so on, very similar views. So we are doing it informally, we are meeting the whole time, and to tell the truth, of course, we by that much bigger influence than any of our country would have if we would try to do it alone. It means, of course, that we have to work on cooperation and understanding between each other. As we are all neighbors, we had problems with the past, shades of history, And Central European history is not so much less cruel than the Balkan history. We all tried once quite sincerely to kill each other, annihilate each other. Thank God we didn't succeed. And that, of course, somehow resonates. So we have to work, besides of working in Brussels, United Nations, or whatever institution, NATO together, we have to work on ourselves, which is the most important thing. It will be never completely the same, but we have to work on our history, so at least if we don't even have the same view, we understand the neighbor's view of history. We have to respect each genuine individual interest, which of course sometimes we have different, and we have to respect it. But it works. It works much better than one thing, especially, which I would recommend, to keep a low profile. So the natural weakness of most politicians, a certain vainness, doesn't complicate the work. As long as we are doing it not in the limelight, not with great speeches, not promoting it, but as long as we stay on the ground, matter-of-fact meetings, it works. And by that, we now realize, as I told you, I'm now rather old already, that there grows up a new generation which has a much more regional thinking than we had. That they really see the complexity of our relation. Therefore, I think regional cooperation is not only the time before entering the European Union or other greater institutions, but even then, one of the most necessary things. But don't forget, it is not only working with and on the neighbor, we have to start working ourselves. That's the most important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before continuing with the questions, just one short remark. You all have seen the small white papers on your chairs. It's a possibility to write a question that you might have for our speakers, and it will be collected, and Mrs. Lick then will, in the last half an hour of this panel, invite some of you that she thinks that have the most provocative or interesting question, or depending on the time that we have left, to pose the question to our panelists. Now going back to the regional cooperation, never-ending story and inspiration in the Western Balkans, I would like to ask Mr. Martonyi and Mr. Mladenov. Different experiences, different settings, and but still you managed to accede to the European Union membership. Visegrad Group cooperation was really very instrumental in this respect. We heard a lot in Serbia, in the Western Balkans, about the benefits of the Visegrad Group cooperation, how it was very helpful for you to achieve the standards of for the EU membership. Still, how much of this experience is maybe transferable to the Western Balkans, to different regions, and more specifically Western Balkans? We literally copied some of the examples of cooperation that existed in the other parts of Europe, like free trade agreements. This was quite successful so far, and economic cooperation in the Balkans is something that is very vital, I have to say. Businesses tend not to recognize borders. But what is, in your opinion, maybe the secret ingredient or the most important advice that you would have from this experience to tell to our region? Maybe just I will finish now. One of the principles that we heard a lot from colleagues from Visegrad Group countries, one of the principles in your cooperation was leave bilateral issues outside the multilateral arena of cooperation among Visegrad Group countries. Maybe this or maybe something else that you can share with us.
Well, it's a very long question. I try to give a fairly short answer, if I can. We still have to go back a little bit in history, because when the change came, 89, 90, I think that the basic aspiration of all countries of Central Europe was to go back to Europe, as we called it at that time. That is, to express it in a more sophisticated way, number one foreign policy objective was to get integrated in the so-called Euro-Atlantic structures. But that was right from the beginning. So that was no doubt number one. But at the same time, the question came to the table, what are we going to do in the region? What are we going to do with the neighbors? First, we had to dismantle existing former structures. We had to dismantle CMEA, we had to dismantle NATO, Warsaw Pact. Immediately, of course, we were confronted with the question, what to do instead of that. Security starts in your neighborhood. Security, we all know it's global. Of course, whatever happens in a remote corner in the world will have an impact upon you, whether this is finances or armed conflicts or whatever else. But I think we were all aware of the fact that security starts in your neighborhood, and when there are challenges, when there are risks, when there are dangers, then you have to stick together with the people around you. Just like in a small village, for instance, in a mountain village, when the avalanche comes, you need your neighbors. And you do not know exactly when the avalanche might or might not come. So, that was a natural drive in all our countries to establish something together. And then some people said, okay, you are doing it only because of Brussels. It was not true. Some people said, you are doing it only because of Moscow, because you wanted to get rid of those structures which I was just referring to. Maybe to some extent, but again, it would not have been sufficient. We all realize that the world is looking upon us as a region. Take, for instance, foreign direct investments. Still the fact, if there is a problem in one country, in the remote places, in the so-called financial centers or in the markets, people cannot make that much of a distinction. So all that led to the regional cooperation idea. In trade, we established the Central European Free Trade Association, CEFTA, which was, by the way, and that's your question, it was extended, and this is now a living instrument in the Western Balkans. It's no more relevant for us since we became members of EU, but it's still, of course, an existing instrument. So it has just been taken over by way of extending the membership. And then, of course, more important and more political was the establishment of the V3 first, three of us, which was then transformed into V4. And one of the objectives which we always underline was, okay, we want to work together for the achievement of the basic objective I started with, that is membership in NATO, membership in the European Union. And looking back now, I think Visegrad and also CEFTA, also in this respect, have been extremely helpful and extremely useful. But we never really wanted to make it a kind of closed shop. And this is also something which we underline now again and again, that our original idea, our idea of Central Europe, is a very wide concept. It's certainly not limited to Visegrad. Visegrad is one thing, it's a thing which was established for some historic reasons. But at the same time, we developed many other forms and formats of regional cooperation, where we are together with countries to the south, of course, two of them, not much later, became members of European Union, Bulgaria and Romania. And also we have the so-called Central European Initiative, where I think 17 or 18 countries are sitting together. We have many other formats, and the main idea is always the same. This is the strengthening regional cooperation and regional integration. Yes, we were fighting for the enlargement, very true. Why? Because it was also part of our regional policy. It was very important for Europe, it was very important for us, for my country, but at the same time it was a primary interest and objective of the whole region. So it was in fact part of a regional policy. And the same goes for the rest, so we have to go on. And that's why our primary objective and interest is to go on with this enlargement process, and of course also try to promote and help the regional cooperation in the Western Balkans. And as far as the experiences of V4 and some other formats are concerned, they are all available. But times change. Now we have to speed up enlargement process. We have to push it as much as we can. We have to push it with each and every country. How we can push it, at what time we can do what, that's of course another question. But I think that this idea is coming forward more and more, and of course it doesn't mean that the regional cooperation has become irrelevant. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. We established it and confirmed it in many, many conferences, that regional reconciliation, regional stability, regional cooperation is one of the key factors and key conditions for the integration of this region into the European Union. So that's why we keep repeating that we are here to help, we are here to make a contribution as much as we can. Of course, experiences can always be used, but at the same time we also have to take into account that things and times change. The substance, the objective and the values and the common interests remain the same. So as I said, security starts in your neighborhood, but then we all know that without regional security there is no global security either. And in the present world of unpredictability and interdependence, I think that we are all fundamentally interested in a closer and stronger regional cooperation.
Mr. Mladenov, is that one of the reasons that Bulgaria is also quite interested in the Western Balkan region, is very supportive of the improvement of mutual relations and on the advancement to the EU membership? You have been quite prominently speaking that for Bulgaria, Western Balkan accession is one of the priorities. And how do you see, as an immediate neighbor, this regional cooperation in the Balkans, and what do you think, how can Bulgaria assist?
Well, the short answer is yes, but let me give you the long answer.
Please do.
The long answer is, it's long, but it's very easy. We believe that it's in our national interest, the core of our national interest in Bulgaria, to see all of our neighbors in the Western Balkans become part of the Euro-Atlantic structures, as we would call them, or the European Union and NATO. This is the very, very core of our interest. And it's very simple, because we have a historic task, all of us sitting in this room have a historic task, and that is to make war impossible in the Balkans. Because we all know that if there is a conflict within a country, between countries, within a religion, between religions, within an ethnic group, between ethnic groups, in the Balkans, it affects all of us. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to be part of it or not, it affects all of us. And the wars of the collapse of Yugoslavia killed hundreds of thousands of people. They devastated our economy. We were not part of this conflict, but they devastated our economy. They created an image for the whole region that will take years, if not generations, to overcome. So this is a historic task which we need to address. And to be able to address that historic task, we need to see what are the roadblocks that exist to regional cooperation, to integration, to moving forward on this European agenda. And start removing these roadblocks one by one. Whether sometimes these are very small roadblocks. Political indecisiveness, that's a small roadblock. Connecting the energy infrastructures of our countries, that's a big roadblock. Political differences in a country, weak or strong governments, that's a small roadblock. But making sure that our military can work together is a big roadblock. A few weeks ago, President Tadic was in Bulgaria, in Shabla, where for the first time our two armies trained together on the Black Sea, and it was quite an exciting experience to see Bulgaria as a member of NATO, inviting its neighbor Serbia, and our militaries working together and training. This overcomes some of these roadblocks. We face major challenges in this part of the world, and the first major challenge perhaps is our minds. For too long has this region been subjected to influence from the outside. It's about time that we start designing our own history, making sure that we are part of our own future, and not expecting to be measured up against somebody else from the outside, or expecting to see the influences, the decisions from the outside, make our own decisions here. And what does that practically mean? It means that, again, as President Tadic spoke earlier on organized crime. Organized crime in the region is far more integrated than all of our political structures are. So we need to work much more closely together, because every time a criminal group is caught, whether it's in Hungary, in Serbia, in Bulgaria, or somewhere else, they end up being connected to other criminal groups in the region. So we need to be a step ahead of that, and we need to be able to fight that. And this is, for us in Bulgaria, this is priority number one. Priority number two is connecting our infrastructures. To fly to Vienna, to be able to get to another capital in the region is, forgive me for the use of the word, but it's pathetic. We need to make sure that our roads are connected, we need to make sure that our airlines are connected, that our train networks are connected. This is an important priority to be able to overcome the roadblocks that exist in our minds. We're very weak as a region in terms of energy. Our electricity networks face major challenges. Our gas networks need to be connected. This is actually a European challenge, which is far broader than just the Balkans, but it is a very, very important one for us here in the Balkans. Particularly now that we have in the European Union communication from the European Commission finally on how Europe will be speaking with one voice to our energy suppliers outside of Europe. This is an important step for the European Union, very, very decisive step for the European Union that also needs to galvanize support here in the Balkans as well. So these are issues that we need to tackle and that they're quite important. What do we have as assets? We have a hidden asset, and this is our common cultural and historic heritage. We're very good at arguing in the Balkans about our identity and about our cuisine and about our coffee and about our rakia, but it's actually all of our common cultural and historic heritage, because the richness of this part of the world is, as Karol was saying, the fact that we're all related, family, religiously, ethnically, in one way or another. So we have to exploit this much better than we are doing right now. So celebrating our common cultural and historic heritage would make us stronger. Working together in overcoming some of these leftover bilateral issues that exist, that we have inherited from the past, is very, very important as well. Because not by putting them under the rug, but by actually addressing them. and finding the political leadership and the vision to address them. If we are able to do that, if we're able to celebrate our common cultural and historic heritage, if we're able to show the solidarity that is needed between us right now in times of financial crisis, in times of difficulties, show that solidarity, which is a basic principle of the European Union. It's actually not a very fashionable word to use these days in the European Union, but it is the core of what Europe is about. Part of this solidarity in the Western Balkans, in the Balkans in general, means that we need to solve our own problems, work together with our neighbors to remove the roadblocks, and be much more effective as a region as a whole. So I don't belong to the school that says each country must look at Brussels, and if we all look at Brussels, somehow we will end up working together. I belong a little bit more to the school that says we all need to work together and work towards achieving the common standards and the legal base that the European Union has, extending it now to the Western Balkans as enlargement progresses. This will bind us together. This is what finally will make war impossible. It will make conflict impossible in the Balkans, and it will allow us to celebrate our own richness that we have in this part of the world. This is a historic task which is unfinished. This is a historic task that we all share, and I hope that we will be able to, within our political lifetime or our own political career, see that image of the Balkans gone, the one of the quarreling different nations and religious groups and shifting borders and all of that, and a new image of shared identity, shared responsibility, and the shared future in Europe emerge. This is a very, very important task, and I hope that we, both in NGOs and government and across our societies, will be able to see this through. That's why we say in Bulgaria, this is our core national interest. Our national interest is to see all of the countries in the Balkans meet the standards of the EU and become part of it.
Thank you very much. I completely agree with you. I would like to see that the Balkans are synonym for fun and peace rather than conflicts. But now let's take a look at Brussels. Mr. Panino, European Union's role in fostering and enhancing regional cooperation in the Balkans have been quite prominent. Not to say that there hasn't been local incentive and need to do so, especially in the economic circles, cultural circles, civil society. Civil society practically never knew about the borders and conflict, a big part of the civil society of our countries. But still, this has been helpful, so to say. It's a part of the EU conditionality policy as well, and we now see, a decade ago, after the conflicts, that we have over 40 regional structures set in place here in the Western Balkans. Most of them, part of them, or majority of them, I think, thanks to the European Union involvement. What is your opinion, and how do you assess, has there been an advancement in this cooperation, a genuine sense of ownership increasing in the region, and what is your look from Brussels on us here in the Western Balkans at this moment?
Well, I think that certainly the regional cooperation has developed quite substantially in the last few years. It has been one of the features of the way the life has been structured in Brussels, I would say, in different forms, not only in the Western Balkans, but I mean, it's the Visegrad 4, but also other forms of different cooperation that have taken place and developed and have helped to focus on specific areas and specific regions. So I mean, all in all, I would say that certainly this process has been positive and has created some communalities, has allowed to find some common policy lines. Seen from Brussels, the idea of dealing with a broader region rather than with one single country is also helpful, in the sense that there can be positive aspects and positive overlaps in the activities which is being performed by each country. But it is true that at the end of the day there is also a sort of bilateral relations that needs to be kept between the EU and a specific country. What I'm trying to say is that, and now I'm speaking more specifically about the enlargement process, certainly we are looking at the Western Balkans as a region and trying to understand which are the features and the characteristics that are proper for typical of this region. And I think that Minister Mladenov has identified some of them in positive and in negative. Fight against organized crime, fight against corruption, which is something which is unfortunately common to the region, but also the quest for a better integration, more interconnection, and this can be achieved only through an enhanced regional cooperation. At the same time, the process needs to be continued, especially the enlargement process, on a own merits basis. And we cannot have, let's say, an enlargement process that is encompassing at the same time all the countries necessarily, because there are different levels of development and different level of achievements in the countries of the region. And I think that from that perspective we have to be aware, and you have to be aware, I mean, of the, since we are here and we are in Belgrade, of the progress that has been achieved specifically by Serbia in that perspective. I think that the European agenda that we have jointly developed in the last few years, and I would say more specifically in the last couple of years, has been remarkable from many points of view. In terms of reform process and how the countries has changed. You were speaking about the conditionality. I prefer the transformational power of the enlargement process. It's not just that we are imposing conditions, we are just trying to work on common standards and practices, and this is a process that is creating a very virtuous circle from many points of view. I've been struck by the changes that have taken place in many of the countries of the region, and certainly if I look at the reform agenda that this country has managed to implement in the last couple of years, it's quite remarkable from many points of view. I think that you have also to be aware of the fact that in terms of reconciliation, and I think that Minister Matoni was speaking about the need of regional reconciliation and the importance of it. This is also another factor which is remarkable in terms of how much Serbia has managed to work with its neighbors, with Croatia, with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and trying to facilitate and foster this reconciliation regional process. I don't need to speak about the SCTY, the recent arrest of the 2 remaining fugitives have been extremely important. Important also in terms of giving a sense of the fact that international justice is another element that helps reconciliation. And from that point of view, it is important that old statements that are going back to the past are avoided, because it's not helping this kind of process which is bringing finally the countries of the region together. So I mean, in that perspective we will, and since we are now very close to an important appointment for this country and for us, which is the issuing of an opinion about the possibility of granting candidate status to Serbia for starting finally the journey towards the integration to the European Union. You have to be aware that all these elements are there, and will be taken into account and duly taken into account in the moment when the decision will be taken. I would like to take maybe to some of the elements that the President has, President Tadic has expressed in his speech, especially in the introductory part. when he said something that I feel also very strongly, and I cannot agree more, that 1989 was a missed opportunity for this part of the world. And if I've taken good note of what he said we are working hard to avoid to repeat the same mistakes in the past. And I think that it is a very important message. I think especially in this specific juncture, it is very important to understand that when it comes to an important crossroad, you have to turn in the right direction, because that's the best way to miss opportunities. He was saying that the right balance between what is needed and what is desirable must be found. And this is also another important element. I think that from that point of view, we are all living in an interconnected world and not in a vacuum. And he was also saying that this region is success in the making, and that there is a process of democratic consolidation which is taking place. And I think that this is also another important point that needs to be taken into account. And if I may turn to also what Minister Mladenov was saying before, I mean, it's the time is now for focusing really energies on a positive agenda, on trying to see how this region as a whole can be interconnected and can be connected to Europe. Borders in Europe have a different meaning and also maybe a different importance from many points of view. So I mean, all these elements I think are very important to be taken into account, to realize how much work has been done in order to get Serbia closer to the European Union. If I may, also on a personal note, I think that I'm very proud to be among the group of friends of Sonia Licht, and it is true that with Sonia and with many in this room and in this country, we have worked for years in order to make it the European perspective a reality. And now the perspective is there and is really at reach. So to end with what the President was saying, look at the past, also at the recent past, look at the future, and take the right turn.
It seems you agree. We have many points of agreement with Mr. Tadic. That's good. Mr. Ježevica, I wanted to ask you about security cooperation in the regional cooperation, security aspect of the regional cooperation. How important that is. We will have a panel later this day about security cooperation in the Visegrad Group, among the Visegrad Group countries. It will be elaborated more in detail. But in your opinion, because, for example, because we are here where we are, in Belgrade, in the Balkans, we faced the most difficulties in establishing military, police, judiciary cooperation. That proved to be the most important, in fact, for our relations and advancement towards the EU. How much this is really important, and is this the key ingredient of good relations?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Sonia, for your very kind introduction and very kind words. It's good to be back in Belgrade, and it's good to be back in Belgrade on my own behalf, and of course on behalf of my minister Dorinda, who is a frequent visitor to Belgrade. Before I answer the points that Maya has asked me, I'd like to share with you 3 points, very quick ones. The first one, is I think one point of your pride, one point of pride of Belgrade, and 1 point of pride of Serbia, and that is that I think that without any dispute, Serbia has the most dynamic and vibrant civil society. And if you look today at the crowd that has gathered here, if you read the program, and if you see the people who are on the program and on the panels, if you see the ministers who have come here today, you certainly can be proud that Belgrade attracts attention. All those who have come here today feel that power of attraction, and they took time and energy to come here because they know that there is something that they have to say and that there is something that you from. So I think that from this point of view, you can be very proud of you. Secondly, you know, me as a Slovak, I'm very proud that part of the inspiration for today's forums comes from Slovakia, from the Globsec conference, which is organized by the next generation of Slovaks who will occupy very senior positions in the country. And of course, I'm very glad that today with me two special people have come, and one of them is Pavel Demes from the German Marshall Fund, and the other one is Rastio Káčer, our former ambassador to the United States and the president of the Slovak Atlantic Commission. And you will have an opportunity to sense their thoughts later, because they'll be moderating two panels. And third point, you know, we as a Slovak try to keep a connection with Belgrade. This is not the first event. When I look back, Bratislava process, which started 12 years ago, you know, there is a long way that we have traveled together, and we are, of course, very strong supporters all belonging to Europe, because we believe in that, and because that you are a part of Europe. As for the question that was asked by Maya, yesterday when I was in the car traveling to Belgrade and trying to get the time, free time without the cell phone in the car, I was thinking how I'll make the story of regional cooperation, which for us, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, the Czechs and the Poles, was so important, how to make that story understandable and transferable to you. And there was one thing that came through my mind, which I'll try to use to explain what I would like to say, and that was that's quite a unique thing, I think. When you travel from Bratislava to Belgrade, you have to cross the Danube 3 times. You have to cross it. You have to cross it in Bratislava. You have to cross it shortly before Budapest, and you have to cross it shortly coming to Belgrade. And you might ask, okay, so you crossed the Danube 3 times. So what does it have in common with regional cooperation? But I see 5 points which I think are the points which Danube and regional cooperation have in common. The first one, I think, for the river, it is that it connects us. There is no dispute, nobody needs to elaborate on that further on. Second is that it has a higher meaning, it has a purpose. You know, for some, the river is just a means how to drain a certain area out of water. For some, the Danube has its meaning all along its road from Germany to the Black Sea, and of course, at its very end, its waters are becoming a part of something bigger. Its waters become the part of the Black Sea. Third, the river has a substance. There is a lot of water which goes which goes with the water, which goes with the river. You can use it to produce electricity and some other things. Fourth, it generates opportunities. You can certainly navigate it. It helps the trade. It helps contacts. And fifth, it generates attraction. For the people who have been on the river, whether they have been the tourists or for the locals, the Danube is a phenomenon that attracts attention. And I think that these 5 features apply also to the regional connection. The very first one of them is a role of a connector. You know, for all of us at the panel here who are a part of Visegrad, our cooperation has been a connector for us. and your regional cooperation must be the same. Secondly, as for the higher meaning and the purpose, you know, the original Visegrad, when we go a little bit into the history, 675 years ago, in 1335, when the Czech, Polish and Hungarian kings have gathered in Visegrad to resolve some issues. And when we take its modern form from 1991, when we invented it, and Mr. Schwarzenberg was at the birth, at the cradle of Visegrad, when we and so was Minister Martoni. When we take it as a platform to get us back to Europe. We always believed that we are a part of Europe from which we were torn apart for 50 years, and we understood Visegrad as a vehicle which can allow us to get back to Europe. Third, it must have a substance. It must have an agenda, and it must be genuine. You know, the European agenda is very simple. And you can explain it very quickly. It's free movement of goods, people, capital, and services. And you know, look around. What can you do more in order to foster free movement of goods, capital, services, and of course, how you can foster what Maya was referring to, and that was security cooperation, because without security there is no prosperity. There is a very simple linkage, and I think that this is one of the parts that should be included in that agenda. Fourth, it must be able to generate opportunities. Well, not only it must be able to generate opportunities, but you have to be able to support each other. It's now a part of the history, but back in 1997, Slovakia was a laggard. We were lagging behind the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland in their negotiations with the North Atlantic Alliance, in their negotiations with the European Unions. The Czechs, the Poles, and the Hungarians never have said to us, listen, Slovaks, we are happy that you are behind, and we'd like you to be even more behind. Just on the contrary. They have always said, we would like Slovakia to be a part of the same space of security and prosperity as we are. And we, when we were lagging behind, we said to our neighbors, we are not envious of you that you are a little bit ahead of us, though we would like to be with them. But we would like to redouble or triple our efforts so that we can run faster, and we can do the steps that took you longer in a shorter period of time, and that we can join the community with you, and we have done that. So it has to be genuine, and you have to be able to support each other. It does not depend whether the countries are large or small or smaller, but you have to be able to support each other, and you have to be able to generate good tendencies in other countries. And when you are lagging behind, you have to praise those who have come ahead of you, and you have to put more effort so that you can be at the same level. Not to be a brake for them, but it should be an incentive for you that you can run faster. And fifth, regional cooperation must generate attraction. A regional cooperation which cannot be multiplied, a regional cooperation which does not have the power of attraction, nobody wants it, nobody speaks about it, nobody is interested in it. But a regional cooperation which generates good news, which generates good tendencies, which generates more reforms, which generates better steps, which are taking you, all the actors, towards where you want to be. And that is, I believe, our common space of Europe. I think it has to have those aspects. So these are, I think, five meanings which regional cooperation must have. And just one point, and I'll conclude there, and that is, as I was looking at Slovakia, you know, we have in Visegrad we have a very central location. And that is a feature which none of the other countries in Visegrad has, and that is that we neighbor all the three other countries. We are neighbors with the Hungarians, we are neighbors with the Czechs, we are neighbors with the Poles. None other country has that. Only we have that. And I'm not saying that with the lack of modesty in myself. What I'm trying to say is that when I'm looking at Serbia, its situation is very similar, and what I'm talking about is not geography. This is not about geography. This is about politics. And that politics is that when you have that central location, you must be you have a special responsibility for fueling that cooperation, for moving it ahead, to be one of the engines of that cooperation. Of course, in regional cooperation, there is at no time there is only one locomotive. There are multiple locomotives, and Visegrad 4 is an example of that. But you have to have them aligned in a way that they go ahead, because if you have them in opposite direction, the train would go nowhere. And the very last point, when I was traveling yesterday from Slovakia to Serbia, on the Slovak-Hungarian border, you no longer have to stop for 3 years. There is no border. But you have to stop at the Hungarian-Serbian border. And as we were talking, as we were talking about borders, which stand in Europe for 50, 60 years after the World War II, I was thinking about all that time and energy and the human lives that were broke at the border. And I was asking myself, what kind of a sense did the introduction of border had? And I was very pleased to see no border between Slovakia and Hungary, and I'm sure that it will not be too long when I have a chance to travel in a car from Slovakia to Belgrade without stopping at the border. So wish you all the best and thank you.
You heard the panel, and in the same time, I hope you are working hard on writing down your questions to the panel. I'm also reminding you that you were asked to write down your questions. We are expecting those questions, and before they arrive, they didn't yet, I would like to ask our distinguished panel whether we were planning this anyway, whether you would like to react to anything others in the panel said. And I would in fact also like to ask our last question, not because we necessarily wanted to ask it, but because Milan Ježovica provoked me to ask the last question. You talked about the engine. There are, of course, many who like to talk about the leaders of the region. And sometimes it seems that everybody feels as a leader, which is obviously in human nature. The question is also for me whether really in regional cooperation you need leaders, or you need something else. So anybody, either of this question or reacting to someone in the panel?
Well, I think we should have the ambition to have in the regional cooperation ideas, visions, and concrete projects. But leader in this work are not the most necessary thing. Just, I remember sometimes each nation thinks she is the top leader. I remember even in the Visegrad cooperation, there was a moment where Poland, as the biggest country, was sure that they should lead everything. I remember very beginning of the 90s, we in Prague thought as we were the democratic countries already since World War I, and We had a lot of trained people. We should be. Then the Hungarians at a certain time too, I remember, they had the best relation with Germany already in '89. They had very good relation with the Americans. There was a much more open economy than all we together we had. Hungary had certain aspirations too. Finally, we found out, all of us, that this is a nonsense, and that we should be a bit more humble, which was very, very good for us to tell the story. Now, I think you have to have visions, ideas, concrete projects, as many as possible, very concrete things, but we shouldn't bother about the question as a nation or a personality should be the leader. If a personality develops with time to a really respected leader, it is wonderful. But that happens rather seldom.
Thank you. Minister Martin.
Well, this concept of leadership raises another issue, which is competition, because you have competition even in the closest regional cooperation or integration. You do have competition within the European Union. Of course you have competition, let's say, in V4 or anywhere else. So we have to try to draw a line between what we call competition, which is healthy, which is useful after all, which is human, natural, and rivalry. Now, if you raise the issue of leadership, you inevitably raise the question of rivalry. And that's why I would avoid speaking about leadership per se. Of course, there is a division of labor. There are some members of the cooperation which are, let's say, more apt to tackle some of the issues. Minister Schwarzenberg mentioned Poland. I think it's very useful for V4, for Visegrad, that Poland is also part of another cooperation, a loose form of cooperation, which is called the Weimar Triangle. For V4 it's useful, because then Poland, of course, could represent some of our concerns or considerations within that cooperation. So that's how I would approach things, that we may have a thematic, let's say, division of labor. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. And I think the same applies for the Western Balkans, that each country has different history in a way, different strengths, assets, challenges, handicaps. Let's try to use it to the best of the family. So that's the family and the solidarity approach, I think, which is much more useful for any kind of regional cooperation than the issue who is the leader or who is not a leader. That's my approach to this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ježovica.
I see two forms of leadership. One of them is institutional leadership. And this is what we are practicing in Visegrad. You know, this year the Czech Republic has the presidency of the Visegrad 4. It will come to an end in the middle of next year. Last year Slovakia had the presidency of the Visegrad 4. So did Hungary and Poland. If I look at the European Union, last half year Hungary had presidency in the European Union. This half year Poland has a presidency in the European Union. And this is what I called institutional leadership, where we do respect that we have agreed that for some time somebody would be set the agenda. Of course in cooperation with us, of course in agreement and in consent. So this is what I called institutional leadership. And then the other part is is what I would call a normal leadership, and that is I think something where you lead by the power of attraction and you lead by the power of example. We are very lucky that we no longer have to be led by people who have proclaimed themselves to be the leaders. We choose the people who lead us. They have to compete for our attention, and we trust them because we believe that they'll lead us in the desired direction. And in the regional cooperation, this is exactly the kind of leadership that I'm talking about, and that is not being proclaimed leader, but being a leader who can do on behalf of the group the most, who is the most advanced, who has the most capacities. And in Visegrad 4, in some things Hungary is the leader, in some things Czech Republic is the leader, in some things Poland is the leader, and some things Slovakia is the leader. Minister Martoni was very rightfully elaborating on the idea of leadership versus competition. But I think that leadership is not only a healthy thing, but it can generate good trends if it is based on the division of labor, and if it is based on generally respecting that each of us is different and each of us is better at doing something. And I think that this is the real genuine leadership for which I would be calling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Mladeno.
Talking about leadership and regional cooperation sounds like something from before the end of the Berlin Wall. It sounds like some competition about who will wave the flag and who will follow, and that is exactly the wrong approach to take to any form of cooperation. I'd be much more interested in actually talking about what it is that we can do together, instead of trying to frame it in one form or another to say you lead on this and you lead on that, because the appointment of leaders is something for the people to decide in elections, and when it comes to cooperation between states, it is the interests of states. If we don't understand that it is in our interest, in our interest of survival and of development and of security and of prosperity to work together, then it doesn't matter who we will appoint as a leader, and then we will end up having 501 different formats for meetings for people to come. So in one meeting one can be a leader, in another meeting somebody else can be a leader. But the prosperity, the security, the opportunity that we want to see emerge from us working together will not happen. So this is the fundamental question to me, is actually how do we no longer discuss issues about who leads on what, and we focus on the real issues that our people and our societies face.
Thank you very much. We have a wonderful audience, very attentive, but obviously not too hard-working, so the questions were not written down. That's okay. Since that didn't happen, I'm now going to open the floor for you, and I hope the questions will come. Please, Ambassador Konusin.
I would like first of all to thank you panelists for very interesting and helpful interventions for those who are living here and working here. In his introductory intervention, the President of Serbia confirmed Serbia's aspiration to the European Union. I would like to put a question specifically to Mr. Mladenov and maybe to Mr. Sanino. I am sure that leaders of the region, when they meet, they discuss experience of their cooperation or experience of their accession to the European Union. You share your positive experience. My question is, do you have any negative experience in the process of approaching, accessing to the European Union, which you might share with this country in order to avoid mistakes, miscalculation, or maybe bad surprises you faced? And I thank you.
Thank you very much. Nikki?
Let me start by saying that Serbia's future is in the European Union. There is no alternative. There is no other road. There is no other model. There is no other possibility. The only road for Serbia is to become part of the European Union. This is in the interests of the people of this country, and this will provide them with the opportunities for development and for prosperity that everyone else in the European Union has. Everything else is a myth. So we start from this presumption. It's not a presumption, this is the reality. Now, when you start from this reality, you need to understand that the dynamics of accession have a certain way of going ahead. It's a lot of work on approximating your legislation, on changing your practices, on making sure that you adopt the various parts of the acquis, in implementing it, and all of that. If there are any lessons from our own experience, which I always share with our friends in the Balkans, and they're the following. First of all, accession to the European Union, reforms and adopting the acquis communautaire does not mean that you reform your country entirely. You have to do other things as well. Not everything is covered by the acquis communautaire. You have to focus on education, you have to focus on healthcare, you have to focus on judiciary. There is really no acquis communautaire in the areas of judiciary or healthcare or education, but these are three key sectors. And some of us made mistakes of postponing these reforms and saying we will do these reforms a little bit later once we complete the other reforms that are needed for EU accession. This is not the right choice. You have to do them together, you have to do them all at the same time, because otherwise you risk developing in a dynamic that delays your progress. So this is very important. The second point is you need to be extremely careful about implementing what has been agreed. This is not a negotiation in which you agree something on paper and then you put it in a little drawer and you will come back to it when somebody from Brussels calls you and says, what did you do with this? This is about changing the way your society works, about the way that your institutions work, and the way that you communicate with others. And fundamentally, and this is perhaps in the long run, the biggest challenge that everyone in Central and Eastern Europe faced around accession, when you get close to the point of accession, there's a peak in nationalist sentiment in countries. And then this peaks, and then it comes back to some normal level which exists in any country. And it is very important to explain to people in this process that becoming part of Europe does not mean that you lose your national identity. On the contrary, you enhance your national identity. You give it new meaning. You give it new instruments. And this is a very, very important debate that I think many of us were unaware of, that we would have to be facing this debate when we were moving into the European Union, because it was a first to all of us. So if I can use these three very broad lessons learned, I think these would be very important. There's nothing negative in them. It's all positive. It's just about being aware of them before you move ahead.
Thank you, Nikki. Stefano.
I could subscribe everything that Mr. Mladenov said. I would say on first of all about the European perspective of Serbia. And this is not only a real concrete one and something that is at reach and for which this country has worked a lot. also would like to see that this is in the interest of Serbia as it is in the interest of the EU, of the European countries. We feel very strongly that the arrival of the Western Balkans, starting with Croatia and hopefully with all the others following the course, could give to the European Union a lot in terms of enriching the spectrum of the policies of the Union, connecting the regions and the countries to the European Union. So I mean, that's a point that I would like to make. It's a two-way interest. It's not only in the interest of Serbia. I think that last year one of the main points that we have tried to make when it was coming to the enlargement process was the credibility. Two-way street credibility, in the sense of being credible, the countries of the region in their reform process, and so in respecting their part of the pact, and being credible the European Union in terms of delivering the accession. We believe that the Croatia example from many points of view is very important in that perspective, because it's where the pact has been respected. Croatia has undergone a very substantial process in terms of reforms and approximation of legislation and implementation, and I agree very much with the point that Misa was doing. And we have delivered in terms of bringing the country into the European Union, and I have to say that Hungary and Minister Martonyi personally have been a driving force in making it happen in the timeline that we had all hoped for. It is important to underline and to stress that, and again I did it before, but I want to do it once again, this is not, how to say, about conditionality. It's not the fact that we are putting conditions in order to. We're just, how to say, discussing and negotiating with acceding countries ways and means for these countries to become full members of the European Union. This means become predictable partners that can be trusted, that can help in bringing stability to the region, and this is another important element, and that can take up the responsibilities that are deriving from being member of the European Union. So the transformational power, the transformational aspect, or the soft power, however you want to call it, of the European Union is extremely relevant from that perspective, because it helps the transformation of the countries. And if you, I think that you all agree with me, if you travel in Central and Eastern Europe, the changes that have occurred from the moment when countries joined the European Union to today, it's absolutely remarkable. It's important, the reform process, it's important implementation, and I think that that's absolutely key and essential. That's why we are insisting so much in creating a substantial, appropriate track record to show that reforms are not only on paper, but are affecting really in a positive way the life of citizens, and creating the conditions for having more prosperity and more security in all the countries. There is only one slight element that I would like to add to what the Minister was saying. When it comes to the judiciary, we are developing a sort of acquis in that area, and somehow we have, especially we have started with Croatia, but now we have done it in a much more structured way, because the independence, the efficiency and the accountability of the judiciary, it's a key element for creating the basis of rule of law in each country. And this is the reason why we have worked so closely also with Serbia in the reform of the justice sector, and we are still working very closely with them in order to make it sure that this reform is not only can it start on the right foot, but it can also have positive impact and a positive effect on the development of the country and of the society.
Thank you very much. And now I call on Mr. Dr. Alper Kaliber from Turkey. I received his questions. Where are you? Mike. Mr. Kaliber was part, just before the mic arrives, for you to know, he was part of yesterday's pre-event to the forum that gathered young academics, researchers, and developed, I would say, a very, very important part of this whole gathering. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure, it still is a great pleasure to be here. I would like to ask a question regarding the role of Turkey in the Balkans. I'd like to ask the ministers, how do they assess the role of Turkey in the regions? Turkey tries to promote regional integration and cooperation. It tries to adopt a more active foreign policy. But do you think, does its foreign policy serve to the regional integration or not? How do you assess the role of Turkey? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I understand this is a question for the whole panel, right? So, who would like to answer or to start the answer? Mr. Mladenov?
Between Serbia and Turkey, maybe it falls on us. I think Turkey has been very helpful on a number of issues in the Balkans, particularly in the normalization of relations between Bosnia and Serbia. This has been very, very useful, and particularly in working with Bulgaria on pushing a strong agenda within NATO and with Hungary as well, on pushing a strong agenda in NATO to develop, to strengthen the partnership between Bosnia and Herzegovina and NATO. This is very important. Turkey can be very helpful in the region. However, I don't think that anything that Turkey does can replace the strength of the attraction that the European Union has for this part of the world. And everything that Turkey does and must do in the future should be in support of this integration of the Western Balkans into the European Union. This is the overarching priority for everyone, even more that Turkey itself is a candidate for membership in the EU, negotiating membership. So this partnership is very, very important. It is constructive, and it can assist in moving countries closer, in removing these roadblocks that I spoke of earlier. It's very, very important to focus on some of these roadblocks at least, and work together to remove them. Whether it is by normalizing relations between Serbia and Bosnia, whether it is within Bosnia, making sure that the different communities work together with each other in a manner that actually gets them to form a government at least, and whether it's on the dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade. There are all kinds of issues that need the assistance of all of us.
Thank you. Anybody else? Minister Martin.
I wouldn't speak about this question in that sense, because, I mean, in the sense of what Turkey's role can be in the Balkans, because this has been answered by Minister Mladenov correctly. But, of course, there is another issue here, and that goes back to the previous question. Turkey is a candidate country. Turkey has taken a strategic decision by starting to conduct accession negotiation with the European Union. And what I'm going to say applies, I believe, to each and every candidate or even aspirant, and that's why I am referring to the previous question. So any candidate or any aspirant must take a strategic decision, And from then on, this must be a national priority. Internally and externally, I think that must be then the basic objective, the basic ambition of that given country. And the only advice that I would give on the basis of our own experiences is that once you have taken such a decision, you have to be adamant and stubborn and obstinate towards your own public opinion, which is also very important, but also towards your own negotiating partners. I just give you an example, which is of course not exactly the same, but still. When we started negotiations with European community in 98, only 6 of us, that was the so-called Luxembourg group Milan you just referred to. And when we started it, negotiations were going on very, very slowly. And that's an understatement, because for about 1.5 or 2 years, very little happened. But we didn't give up. Some of us became a little bit frustrated in the public opinion in Hungary, also in Poland, as we know. But there was then a strategic agreement. We don't get frustrated, we do not give up, we are adamant, we go on. So that's one of the advices, that apart from making your own homework and everything, you must never give up whatever happens, because that's your national priority and that is a basic strategic decision you want to implement. So that would be my very humble advice to all candidates, as I said, referring to the previous question as well.
Thank you very, very much. Does anybody else? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Danko Aleksic. I'm a master student in international security. I would like to pose a question to Mr. Ježevica. Mr. Ježevica, you told us about development of cooperation between V4 countries, about common interests and common position. Could you give us your opinion, how is it possible that Slovakian position towards Kosovo is so different than position of 3 other countries? President Tadić stressed how important the Kosovo issue and how challenging that issue is for the whole international system. How is it possible that there is no common position within V4 countries? Thank you.
Well, the good thing about this world is that we are a world of diversity. And even within the so limited, such as limited scope framework or platform as it is Visegrad 4, where there are only 4 partners, there is an opportunity for the diversity. And you know, this is something very, very natural, which we did not have any special discussion about the Visegrad, why it was that 3 countries had a different opinion on the recognition of Kosovo, and Slovakia was a non-recognizer of Kosovo. This was not an issue for Visegrad 4. This is simply a demonstration of the fact that with unity on other issues, there could be also diversity on the others. This is the best response that I can give to you.
Thank you. Anybody else that I don't see? Yes?
My name is Natasha Herer, coming from Hungarian weekly newspapers, Csaladikör, from Novi Sad. And I was very inspired with these very good talks of this forum. And I would like to give a purpose that actually one apropos, and this is very good address actually, that we are forming the name of the period what we are about to live in and where we are actually living in. The people are working in different fields, but I think that naming is very important, that we are knowing how to go. My purpose is pristojno društvo. Please help me, Sonia, in translation. Decent society. Thank you.
You think so? This was a statement, as far as I understand, and not a question. Any other question? It seems to me that our audience became a little bit tired, which I fully and totally understand. If that's the case, and I don't see any other hand around, or the assistants around, okay. If that's the case, first I would very much like, on behalf of the two of us and all of you, to give a warm applause to our panel. While I was listening to you all and enjoying this conversation, I suddenly, I don't know how and why, remembered that my ancestors used to say, next year in Jerusalem. So everything what I can think about at this point, next year in Belgrade. And now, since our coffee break is called networking coffee break, please take it very seriously. You have a longer time than it was planned. Don't leave the venue. You will have an ingenious, great, very challenging next session, chaired by my dear friend and colleague Ivan Vejvoda. Please be back a little bit before 1.